今天很高兴请到从瑞士来的瑞士的自由大学来的这个Lam Gruber 教授啊，他呢是现在是国际地理学会的这个编辑区域的秘书长，他曾经也在国际地理学会呢当过编辑区域与编辑性的研究这个委员会的主席。那除了这个以外呢，他也到过很多不同的国家呢作为演讲。他曾经在1993年的时候呢到台湾来，我们呢邀请他来做一个 keynote speech。那时候呢是国际地理学会在台湾第一次在台湾办一个国际研讨会。那时候呢就说是因为那个会长呢要我来这个在台湾办这个研讨会，所以我们特别在那个时候呢，就邀请这个Dr. Lam Gruber 呢来这里给我们一个 keynote speech， 就是做一个专题的这个演讲。那这个演讲就谈到就说是编辑区域跟编辑性的它的问题跟它的定义的相关的这个课题，所以他呢，就是在那个时候呢，我们就很清楚说他在这一方面的环境跟边际区域的研究呢是相当有深入的这个心得，所以特别呢就是说每次我们如果有国际研讨会，大部分都会就是说请教他，然后呢请他到台湾来演讲，所以他在1993年以后。来台湾呢，这一次又是第3次，在2003年的时候到台湾来过一次，然后2007年的时候，这个到台湾来一次，然后2013年呢，也被邀请到台湾来，这个都是给专题演讲啊，就是跟环境跟区域研究有关的。那这一次是他退休以后，特别呢。就是说是跟我商量，就是说是他呢，希望能回到台湾来，再跟这个相关的这个老师同学呢，能够跟大家有一个交流。所以他这一次呢是特别这个自费哈，他以前都是我们帮他出钱，他这一次要回馈我们呢，特别自费呢，这个从瑞士呢就说是特别飞到台湾来，然后呢。给我们上个演讲，然后他这个完了以后呢，就是说是这个再到台湾南部去看看这样，所以他在台湾大概要停留2个礼拜，1个礼拜在北部，就是以我们法鼓作为核心，就是在北部这个停留，然后另外呢有1个礼拜都是从这个台东一直到南部的垦丁，然后从高雄就回瑞士。大概行程是这样。那我们今天很高兴的，就说是下午有2个演讲。第一个阶段是这个2点到3点半呢，我们这个演讲的题目叫做 Interaction between Nature and Humans。然后这个3点半到5点呢是另外一个演讲，是叫做这个 Environmental Ethics， 这个所谓的环境伦理。这2个题目，所以我们现在这个欢迎他呢来给我们第一个题目这样。Let's welcome Professor Lam Gruber to give us a talk about the interaction between nature and humans. Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to speak in English.
Yeah.
I don't know what he said.
Slowly.
Yes, okay, I will do my best.
Okay.
Can you understand me? Do you want?
Do you need the microphone?
Yes.
Is this better for understanding? Okay, let's try. Right. So, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to come to Taiwan again and to be in this distinguished place of the Dharma Drum Institute of Advanced Studies? No. And he invited me actually to talk about this topic, which has a lot to do with, in a way, Buddhist thinking, but ethical thinking. It's not limited to any particular religion or philosophy. But maybe I find here a lot of inspiration to it. In fact, there are many inspirations on this topic. One of these inspirations is doubtlessly also this book by Jack Williams and Chang-Yi Chang on Taiwan's environmental struggle. And it's a very interesting subtitle, Towards a Green Silicon Island. I'll come to that later, but we have been talking a lot about green economy in Switzerland recently. So the topic about green is, this is the color of the future, I should say. Now, I have divided my talk into two parts. One is this one about interactions between nature and humans, and the second part is about environmental ethics. So one is a bit less theoretical, and the other is maybe a bit more theoretical. But I start off with a picture which you probably all know, I hope so at least, Yelyu Geopark, which is not very far from here. And my primary reflection is that one of these key terms when we talk about this humans and nature, one of these key terms is the ecosystem. And for me, the ecosystem is everything, which means nature and humanity together. And we all know, it is simply said, that nature can survive without humans, but we humans, we cannot survive without nature. We know that, everybody knows that, all politicians know that, but of course it is always difficult to put this into practice, because other human interests are often stronger than the interest in nature. And I think the Yelyu Geopark here symbolizes this relation between humans and nature in quite a distinct way. Humans have an interest in nature, as you can see from, well, not that many visitors going there, but there are a number of visitors. They want to admire these forms. But at the same time, humans impose straight lines into nature. Nature has no straight lines. And if there are natural straight lines, they are temporary only, and they will be broken down into curved, cornered, etc. lines again. But humans, they put in straight footpaths. But if you look at the left down here, you see nature ignores the humans. Nature grows into our nicely drawn out straight lines, because straight lines are not natural. In a way, we humans, we are natural, even if we impose straight lines, because we are also somewhat chaotic, fortunately. And of course, we are all part of the same system. This is a picture of Yangmingshan National Park. We have a particular quality, we humans. We do classify everything. Classifying means to draw boundaries around a phenomenon. We separate the world into different sectoral entities, and we hope to understand the world better in this way. And we have animals, we have plants, we have mountains, and there are people who study plants, and there are other people who study animals, and there are other people who study mountains. Animals, plants, they are part of the human world, of the living world. And living beings, they are able to reproduce themselves because in a simple way they have sex. Animals do have sex, humans Plants, it's a bit more difficult, but they do have sex as well, in a way. But what about mountains? What about soil? What about water and climate? The air? Are they non-living because mountains do not have sex? We call them the non-living world, which would mean the dead world, but in fact mountains are not dead, as the Yang Shan here demonstrates. We were in Beito Spa region yesterday, walked up the mountain, we saw the sulfur steam coming from the earth, as you can see here, also sulfur steam coming. There is something living down there. So it's not dead. The earth reproduces itself. Volcanoes build up the earth's surface, and erosion then wears them down, transforms the substance eventually into the soil finishes up in the sea. From the sea arises water vapor, helps to carry on the climate, so everything is actually living, even if it's not living in the same sense as we speak of the living world. Then we should not forget that humans are not just, as we call, social and cultural beings. We also have our nature. We have the natural need to eat and drink. This is purely natural. What is social about it is how we meet together and eat, how we prepare our food, etc. But this is a purely natural need. And certain animals are very social. They form families, they form clans, they have a hierarchy, as we humans do have. And they're extremely intelligent. Sometimes I think certain animals are much more intelligent than human beings, which is a bit sad for us, but it is like this. We descend from primates, and we are part of the animal realm. We are one sort of animal. At the same time, there are plants that are carnivores, that eat insects. Plants do not just live on the air and on the soil, but certain plants live on the insects. So we have this category of predators, which is the lion, the tiger, the shark, or the eagle, because they feed on other animals. But then we have various plants like the sundew to the right, or the heliamphora in the middle, that feed on animals, on small animals, on insects. And we humans ourselves, we feed on animals, we feed on plants. Some feed on plants alone. We cannot survive without simply with feeding on animals, except, for example, if we are Inuit in northern Greenland, where there are no plants growing, but usually we need both. So we have a key question to ask ourselves. Where in the living world are the limits between these two categories, plants and animals? As I showed before, with animals that eat plants only and plants that eat animals, there's no clear limit between the animal and plant realm. We have to admit that things merge into each other. We have to think in continua. There are animals, plants, there's nature, society, but there are things in between. There's not a clear-cut limit between the two. And I think this is important, that we do not categorize blindly into square boxes. The world and life does not consist of little square boxes alone. I think I'll come back to this in my second presentation. Apart from thinking in continua, that things merge into each other, we have to think in systems, in relationships. You know, a system is an entity composed of elements in constant interaction with a tendency towards a dynamic equilibrium. Systems evolve constantly. They are complicated entities. They comprise subsystems. So what I have listed here in an extremely simplified way is population as a system. It consists of various subsystems which consist of subsystems with individual elements. We are not able to recognize this system as a whole. We cannot even seize all the various subsystems. And I don't know, I was simplifying here, so there are certainly more subsystems. If you take the simple term of migration, which is a subsystem, there are so many forces that drive migrations that if we start listing a few of them, it will become extremely complicated, and we would lose the overall view about this system of the population. Working with systems means that we work with probabilities. Humans are never predictable. Even if the weather is not really predictable, which follows some deterministic laws, how can humans be predictable? We make decisions spontaneously, we make decisions which are reflected, and but nobody can tell beforehand what will come out of our decisions. And if we look at this type of system, which I took from one of the IPCC reports, it showed climate change, it showed a number of natural elements that would are being affected. It's land degradation, it's food, it's forestry, it's biodiversity. But climate change does not only affect land, food, biodiversity, etc. It also affects humans. That's why I introduced here culture. And simply, if we look at food supply and demand, this is so much linked to culture of the human societies. You have different food in Taiwan than we have in Switzerland, and that the Inuit have in Greenland and North Canada. And we have different eating habits. You would eat with chopsticks, we would prefer knife and fork, for example. In India, they will roll up their food in the bread and eat it with their hands. So the habits are different, the type of food are different, even the food or the eating rhythms are different. And if we think of other elements, I put in here society, fashion, the way of dressing ourselves are different from one society to another, and the way of dressing ourselves also has an impact on, not on food supply, but on the plants we grow to make our clothes, whether cotton or wool or whatever it is. So the IPCC has certainly thought a lot about climate and the physical world, but sometimes they forget to put in the human component in this system. I've been using the term of ecosystem, and I think in the ecosystem we tend to separate the natural and the social subsystem. Of course, the two, they are interrelated. We receive from the natural subsystem and we give to the natural subsystem. And again, to make things very simple, I just list 4 subsystems in these, or sub-subsystems in these 2 subsystems. They are the known one, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the cryosphere, pedosphere, and the biosphere in nature, and economy, politics, demography, and society culture in the social subsystem. They influence each other, and the way of putting them on this slide is very intentional. The natural subsystem is certainly superior to the social subsystem. I said in the beginning, nature survives without us, but we cannot survive without nature. This is the reality. But in practice, things have been reversed. The ecosystem relations, they have been reversed by humans. We tend to put our own subsystem above the natural subsystem, with the same interactions that occur, but this reversal has also one particular element which I have marked here in red. The economic subsystem is interacting very directly with the natural subsystem. The economic system draws raw materials from the natural subsystem and it deposits its waste into the natural subsystem. And we draw water, we draw minerals, we use the wind for wind energy, we use plants and animals from nature, and all the waste goes back into this natural subsystem. And of course affects the soils, affects the living subsoil biological system, it affects the waters, and it has an effect on the climate. And this is simply because the economic subsystem has developed its own rhythm, its own speed. No, sorry, that's still all right. We can look at this also in a different way. And this scheme will turn up at the end of my second presentation again. The ecosystem has a certain carrying capacity, which is hatched here in green. This carrying capacity allows humans to use all the materials of nature, put it simply, to varying degrees, and for thousands of years humans have been drawing resources, have been depositing waste into the natural subsystem without any problems, without arriving at the limit of the carrying capacity. It was only with the Industrial Revolution that the limits were broken, but fortunately there is a sort of buffer or of elasticity in the natural system. You can overuse the carrying capacity of this of nature to some extent if you go back again and allow it to recover. This is this natural buffer. But of course, if we carry on using it as towards the end of the time, then even if we scale back, we might not come back into this buffer zone, and the ecosystem will eventually be damaged on a permanent basis, which eventually will disturb or even affect our survival in the long term. I can use a very simple example for this, which I drew from a PhD research. Swidden farming, slash and burn culture, which was practiced on a large scale in many countries of the world. This means that in forest areas, people cleared land, planted their food plants, and they used up the ecosystem to some extent. At a certain moment, when the system was exhausted, then the soil didn't yield anything enough, so they had to leave, to give up the land and find a new plot, clear the forest and plant again. And then this time, the plot had enough possibilities to recover, and if the people moved further and further, there was actually excess time left for the ecosystem to recover. So this did not pose any problem. It was local degeneration, but it was not destruction, it was just degeneration, and nature was allowed the time to recover. But of course, when population pressure increases, then you might be tempted to have shorter intervals. And if the intervals become too short, you see that the fallow years are, the length of the fallow years is maybe respected. We come back to the original possibilities of the ecosystem, but then it's used up again, and the next cycle will have to be longer. And then you come back to the original capacity, use it, but then the cycle afterwards will still be longer. But still, the capacity is maintained. It's just that the time frame changes. But if we shorten the recovery period, if we don't allow the system to arrive at its ordinary level of capacity, then of course the capacity will decrease inevitably, and the productivity of the soil will decline. And even if we keep stopping the exploitation, we don't allow sufficient time for recovery, and then eventually the capacity of the region, of the place, will be too much exhausted. There are more examples for this. With excessive demand on the ecosystem, we live it with overfishing. It's a very great concern. Stocks dwindle, and if stocks dwindle, fishermen will either have to travel further, so they have more cost, or governments will intervene and impose a ban on fishing. Then the fishermen will lose their jobs, or they have fishing quota, they impose different reasons, etc., etc. Anyway, fishing stocks are dwindling, and when governments intervene, then usually fishermen are not happy because they can't go fishing. But on the other hand, if they go on fishing, there won't be any fish left, so they can't fish anymore. And this is the contradiction between what the public sphere wants to achieve and what the economic sphere wants to achieve, and we have to find the balance somewhere. Another example I drew from a study from a person from Geneva: fertilizer efficiency. Applying more fertilizers increases, or synthetic fertilizer of course, increases the productivity of the soil in the short run. But then the productivity declines, so we put in more fertilizer, we get the productivity back, but for even a shorter time, we put in more fertilizer, then we poison the soil even more, and then productivity goes down. It's sort of the law of diminishing returns. And this picture, which reaches from 1969 to the 1990s, actually, it clearly shows that you have the ups, but then it's down again. And then you manage to get yield up again, it goes down again. So you put in more fertilizer, but you never reach the same productivity as you reached before. So whatever we do, we cannot keep growing. And I'm always a bit amused about these economists who speak of the growth economy. And people are now worried that China, for example, has grown only by 6.4%, when before it was 7.4%. But we cannot keep growing indefinitely. These examples clearly show it. Certain ecosystems are extremely sensitive. We have tropical corals, for example, which need light and which have an extremely narrow temperature range where they can grow. It's sort of around 18 to 20 degrees, not much more. But now the oceans are getting warmer, so it's getting too hot for the corals to grow. This is, in a way, an indirect human influence on the growth of the coral reefs. But apart from tropical corals, which we all know, there are also deep-sea corals which grow in conditions without light and at very low temperatures. I think these deep-sea corals have only been discovered in recent times. They grow as deep as 1,500 meters below sea level, while tropical corals, they grow in the range of about 20 to 30 meters because of the light. And deep-sea corals, they are mainly known in the Atlantic Ocean. Their threat is not the warming of the oceans, but their threat are the fishermen who use deep-sea harvesting gear, deep-sea nets that run across the ocean floor. So the corals will be taken away by the deep-sea nets. And of course mining for oil, also mining for ice, for iron nodules. And here we have a direct human influence. Humans intervene, and as a bycatch, so to speak, they take the deep-sea corals, which they don't want, but they want the deep-sea fish and other species that are there. So it's the same basic phenomenon, the corals. We have negative effects by human activity. One is the indirect effect through global warming, and the other one is the direct effect through fishing. The Western society has developed a very materialist mentality. It has spread across the world. It's a complex society, and this complex society creates complex problems. And according to our box thinking, to our segregated thinking, we also try to solve these problems in a segregated way. So we have to look at the human drivers, which includes the economy. We have public awareness. We have policy. The policy develops response strategies, and we look at the impacts which we receive. And in fact, we know that all these 5 fields here, they're interrelated. We cannot just find a policy solution without thinking about the impacts and what does this mean for the human drivers and what does this mean for the response strategies. Life has become extremely complex, and unfortunately we have not yet understood exactly how this works. We can simplify things and say we humans are actually part of this complex system. As individuals, we are part of society. We live in the environment, and also the society lives in the environment. We all are inextricably linked. We cannot solve one problem without intervening in another problem. We can just consider which of our personal daily actions have an impact on the society and on the environment, and if we reflect, we shall be astonished how deeply implanted we are with everything. Let's take this model, the chain of actions that results from us as consumers and that reflects respect for nature. If we buy an apple in an organic shop, this apple comes from a farmer who works for his family and cultivates the soil in an organic way. He will care for the soil, for the plants, and if he has animals, also for the animals. He may in this way influence his neighbor farmers who would like to follow his example. And if they do so, they will obviously do something in favor of nature. As a consumer, I benefit from an apple that is free from pesticides and synthetic fertilizer. It will be a healthier product, and this will in turn help me to spend less money on health, my health expenditure. The farmer profits because the organic market is expanding and he saves costs for benefits and fertilizers. And so in the end, it is a win-win situation because the farmer profits, the consumer profits, the society as a whole will profit, and nature profits, and everybody will be satisfied to some extent or another. We are part of the ecosystem. If we behaved a bit more rationally, we could contribute to the survival. This picture here illustrates our ambiguous attitude. We eat convenience food, which is nicely laid out here in this shop. It's maybe a bit an extreme picture. It's all nicely packed up. It's probably all sort of conventionally produced, which means it's transformed by the food industry, and it comes from sort of conventional agriculture with pesticides and everything. It has probably also additives like synthetic vitamins and the like. And it is nicely packed up. So the food itself is not very healthy for us. It's certainly not very healthy for the environment. And in the end, we have packages which have to be thrown away because there's no way for us to use them up again. Food waste is a major problem in the world, although we do not know how much food is really thrown away, but it is estimated, I think there's a UN estimate, that's about a quarter, 25% of all food which is produced, in the end, is thrown away. We have a blind faith in a date which is printed on the package, and we have a blind faith into the presumed quality of this convenience food. Food actually contributes to the greenhouse effect, and this is a graph which refers to Germany. Vegetables, fruit, meat come from nature, but the demands for energy and water are very varied. If we produce 1 kilogram of potatoes, we need about 900 liters of water. If we produce 1 kilogram of beef, we need about 15,500 liters of water. This is quite a bit. You might eat 1 kilogram of potatoes in one go. You might have difficulties in swallowing 1 kilogram of beef in one go, but still it's quite a lot of water. Most of this water for the beef is not for the animals, but it's for irrigating the fodder crop. And it's for the transportation of this fodder crop to the place of consumption by the cattle. On the same surface for which we produce 1 kilogram of beef, we could harvest 40 to 60 kilograms of fruit and vegetables. And we could feed many more people with fruit and vegetables than with beef. It was even the former chairman of the IPCC who suggested that to combat climate change, global warming, we should eat less meat and more fruit and vegetables. And of course, if you look at this graph here, you can see that the animal food production adds almost 50%, about 45%, to global warming. Transportation is relatively negligent. I mean, we are guilty in that respect. We flew to Taiwan. Of course, we are part of the transportation, but if we had been eating meat, we would have contributed much more. And then all the activities by consumers, this is a very strange category, but consumer activities, of course, they would also be driving to shopping, etc. So maybe the transportation sector is a bit bigger, but if you compare the animal food production with the plant food production, which is the fifth on top, you can see that as vegetarians you are on the good side. You do not contribute very much to global warming, but as meat eaters we do. Waste. Food is one thing. Waste is the matter that occurs during the productive and the consumptive process. Waste can either degrade, go back to nature. It can be recycled. It can be burned. It can end up in a landfill, or you could ferment it and produce biogas, and this biogas is a resource. We can also, at least food waste, we can put it onto the compost and it becomes a resource and enters the production cycle again. If you live in the countryside, if you have a small garden plot, then it is easy to have a compost heap. If you're in a city, you need the city authorities to put up a compost collection service, which is absolutely possible, and then they can produce compost collectively and use it for this production again. So waste is not just waste, it is in part, it's a resource, and actually there's very little which will be eventually waste, true waste. In 2002, a German and an American scientist proposed the principle cradle to cradle, which means that any raw material which is being used for products for human consumption should in the end become a resource material again. There should be zero waste. They are realistic enough to say that is probably not quite possible, because there are also substances which are transformed through chemical processes, internal chemical processes. So it's probably not possible to have 100% zero waste society, but even if we can arrive at the 95 or 99% zero waste society, we would be doing quite good. When you recycle, which is here below, then you take it back. Sometimes it looks a bit strange. We throw away glass bottles which are in perfect working order. They're being broken up and they make glass out of it again. It's a bit a zero sum game. You break up glass to remake glass. It's all energy which is being wasted. But at least the glass is, the raw material comes back 100%. If we incinerate waste, we create steam and heat, we can create electric energy, we can heat houses. If we put things into a landfill, then it's a bit more difficult. The landfill ferments and produces biogas, and you can absorb this biogas and produce heat and electrical energy with it. But what happens in the landfill once everything is fermented and you don't know what is going on because it's a landfill, you have covered it up, etc. So this is a critical element. Don't have it under control. You can have fermentation under control, you have compost under control, but landfill is very critical. So at the moment we see the positive effects of it, but maybe in 10, 20, 30 years time we may have to look up what has happened down there. All this comes from one, how shall I call it, one-way culture of one particular worldview, which is consumerism. This is something we have developed, particularly since the Second World War. I should say consumerism, we all consumed, even before the First World War, but after the Second World War, the economic development took such a turn that innovation became one of the key words. New products were created, new products, they are governed by fashion, by the idea that you have something new, and we humans, we are weak in that sense, that we always think we need the latest of something. Now, just a week or 10 days ago, iPhone 7 came on the market. This is the latest iPhone. I'm still using an iPhone 5, which is still working perfectly. I don't know why I need a 7, because it doesn't much more than contain a phone, contain a calendar, my notes, my address book, etc. It's an old iPhone which I bought, I think 3 years ago. It still works. But it's the latest gadget, and especially the young generation needs the latest gadget to show that they are up to date. What happens? The old one becomes waste, electronic waste. At best, they finish up in some third world country where they cannot afford the latest gadgets. But of course, the gadget today is garbage tomorrow. So when someone buys an iPhone 6, and then next year he buys an iPhone 7, at best he gives the iPhone 6 to his wife, who doesn't need it so much, or maybe to his children, and he carries on. That's reuse, at least. But maybe we didn't actually need these new gadgets, which we turn into trash. And you see, every year US consumers throw away 39,000 million tons of disposable cutlery and 29,000 million tons of plastic and paper plates because of the fast food boom. I'm quite positively surprised that in many places here now we get not disposable chopsticks, but chopsticks which can be reused, either plastic or metal. But a few years ago we would get wooden chopsticks everywhere, and now they have become rare. And even in one restaurant where we had wooden chopsticks, they were so nice that it was quite clear these wooden chopsticks, they're too expensive to produce, so they will be washed and reused. So slowly this one-way culture is beginning to change. Then we come to one of my favorite topics, agriculture. To obtain food, we exploit the land. We use, as you can see on this picture, heavy machinery. We use synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. The machines, they compact the soil and reduce the soil's capacity to absorb water. The fertilizers and pesticides will end up in our food, and the pesticides usually do not only kill pests but also useful animals. And we have known this for more than 50 years. Maybe some of you know the book by Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, which was published, I think, 1962 for the first time, a long time ago. And she criticized the indiscriminate use of pesticides, which in the US were spread by airplanes just across the land, and the pilots did not necessarily respect settlements, so it was not only the fields that got the pesticides, but also the front garden, the back garden, my vegetable garden, my house, etc., with negative impacts on people and their health. This book was heavily criticized. It was, of course, it was a woman who wrote it, so at that time women had to be silent, cook and look after the children. They were not supposed to criticize, only men were allowed to criticize. But now, 10 years later already, of course, it was realized that she was perfectly right. And, you know, her book dates from, I think, 62. 10 years later, we had this famous report of the Club of Rome, The Limits to Growth, which is a landmark in a way. It was written mainly by men, and it was heavily criticized, of course, again, because it showed an uncomfortable truth. We are cleverer now, at least in our heads, but the discussions about pesticides, they're still going on. We had a recent discussion in the European Union about glyphosate, which is one of the most widely used pesticides. Sorry. And it's been proved to be, or high probability that it is cancerogenous, but there's no absolute scientific proof that it is, but the probability is very, very high. So the industry, of course, is dead against it being banned. So it's still, the political decision is still pending. We are living with a moratorium, so it's been banned temporarily. And this is no longer a scientific discussion, it is only a political debate between the political system and the economic system. And the worst, actually, which we have to do with is what we call waste and special waste. The industry produces poisonous waste, and then we have been astonished that the rivers and the land are polluted. Veronica and I, we come from Basel. Basel is well known for its chemical and pharmaceutical industries. In the 1950s and 60s, the industry used to evacuate its wastewater into the river Rhine, usually at night. And if you're lucky in the morning, you could see that the Rhine had all kinds of color. Usually it used to be green, but then it was yellow or orange or blue, depending on the wastewater that went into the river. From the 60s onwards, environmental laws, especially laws on the protection of the waters, then began to change the situation. But now we have a new threat, and this is on the second picture. This is the waste in the ocean, the plastic waste in the oceans. Something that has been known for, I think, less than 10 years, that you have huge quantities of plastic waste just below the surface on a depth of maybe about 10-20 meters, all kinds of plastic waste, toothbrushes, all kinds of food waste, food container waste, drinking vessels, etc., etc. And this floats around, it breaks up under the impact of the sunlight, it breaks up, and the impact of the waves. The animals begin to swallow it because they think it's food which is swimming. This upsets their intestine system, and so in the end the oceans, the animals are threatened, they will die, and this is another, it's not overfishing, it's killing through waste. We have the special waste. This is what the industry produces, especially chemical industry. And for many, many years, the waste was just dumped somewhere. And we've had a famous example in Switzerland, but I think you can repeat these examples all over the industrialized countries and probably also in certain developing countries. It was just dumped somewhere, out of sight, out of mind. So there's a famous case in Switzerland of one special waste dump where the chemical industry used an area, a small area, for 7 years to dump this waste. They just put it into barrels, buried them, and said, okay, that's fine. When the groundwater became polluted, then suddenly people realized that something went wrong. Now this deposit has been now rehabilitated. The picture to the right shows a special hall, the inside of the special hall, which was constructed, this hall. Hardly any people worked in there. It was all automatized with robot trucks, because it was absolutely poisonous. And one moment they even had a fire which was self-incineration from the toxic waste in contact with the oxygen, with the air. But they managed to put it out. It took them 8 years. So they put in 7 years, they put in the waste. It took them 8 years to really completely empty this waste dump and to dispose of the waste in a safe way, so that the area can now be rehabilitated for other uses. The problem is that the whole thing costs millions of money, and part of this is, of course, for the public, goes from the public, from our taxpayers' money. So, in a way, we pay for the errors of the industry which made profit out of throwing the waste away. So, as a citizen, we are not quite happy with this situation. It is easier, as we can see, to destroy than to repair. We only realize what has happened after the damage has occurred. And this is something that occurs throughout history. We should be able to learn from history, from experience. And we should know that a war, this is a picture of Aleppo, is not really good. But wars have been going on for thousands of years, and we still haven't understood that wars, they don't bring anything good. The same thing is for purely civil works. The flood, upper right, is in the region of Switzerland, which used to be flood prone. It's actually the floodplain of a river that has just deposited sediments and has pushed the lake, which you see in the background, back. The delta is where the canal ends into the lake. That's the new delta of the river. But what you have between the lower part of the picture and the delta, this is relatively recent stuff. I mean, sort of 10,000 years and around that, since the last ice age. So for many hundreds of years, this plain was not settled. The river was meandering freely according to the natural situation. Settlements were at the edge, the transportation routes were on the hills. And when we had the technology, we started to channel the river and to drain the land. But when there is excess rainfall in the Alps, then of course the water will again find its natural way of drainage. And this is the picture of 1987, when we had very strong rains and the whole plain with the settlements and the roads, motorway, etc., which had been constructed in the plain, in the floodplain, of course, they were covered up. The two pictures on the bottom show the same river in more or less the same location. The first shows how the river looked like after drainage, after it had been channeled, put into a straight, narrow riverbed, with the consequence that we often have floods in the side, but there's no space for the water to evolve during high water and to retract back. So now we spend a lot of money to make the river more natural, or to give the river more space. So first of all, we spend money with our technology, superior technology, to make nice channels, to increase the flow, and then we spend a lot of money again to come back to a situation which is nicer for the river. It's all taxpayers' money again, so as citizens we should say, why don't we follow nature? But that's the problem. And so we have actually here two fundamental principles with which I want to close my presentation. Two fundamental principles which we have forgotten. The first is that the concepts of time are different between nature and humans. We think in terms of life expectancy, and this is a short-lived profit. We think life expectancy is 75 years, so if I do a project, it must be profitable within this time that remains to death. The best example for this short-term thinking is the so-called just-in-time production, where a factory that assembles a product receives the components just in time so they can build them. They don't have to stock components or raw materials, they can just get them delivered. It's very short-term looking. If you have an accident on delivery, then your whole production process is turned upside down. But nature develops according to the specific rhythm of each individual species. Grasses, trees, bushes, they have different time frames. They think in different times. And nature is able to adapt. And this is the second principle which we tend to forget. Change is the constants in our life. In Buddhism you speak of the notion of impermanence. Nothing is really permanent. Everything changes. And we humans think what we have done now, this is done, and this is definitive, this is as it should be. But it's only in our little thinking how it should be, because it will not be permanent. Only if we fully realize that time is really a social construct, that's what we make out of time, and that we cannot be sure that something is final and definitive, but that everything is temporary, then we can actually manage to get along with nature. Thank you for your attention.
May we have some questions?
Yes,
Yes.
if there is time.
Yeah. We still have 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right. 大家经过他刚刚的演讲，有没有心得听得懂吗？他谈的问题就是人跟自然之间的互动关系。那重点就是说是在讲说人呢，这个社会呢，就是对于自然的影响是非常大，尤其对于这个地球来讲，它透过不同的人类活动，不管是生产或者是消费，都制造了很多的废弃物。这些废弃物呢，就是很多是这个不见得说是自然呢是一定要 需要吸收的东西，但是人呢制造这些废弃物呢，使得这个整个全球的环境一直在改变，这是第一点。另外就是他讲说是现在的气候变迁，其实也是因为人为的这个一些活动的影响，造成了对于整个这个全球气候的这个改变。那这个改变呢，这都是使得这都是全球的生态系呢受到影响啊。除了这2点以外呢，他也提到，就说是其实人类的这些活动，不管是农业、工业，还有就是其他的这个活动，造成的影响。那尤其是西方的世界呢，他们就是讲这个一直在强调这个 innovation， 就是说是要这个创新。创新的结果呢，就是有不少的这个问题，就是 one way， 就是说是 society， 就是它就新的出来以后就把旧的就丢掉，就造成很多的这个也是废弃物的问题。另外一点，他提到就是说，跟我们的这个佛教可能有关系。我们佛教呢，就是谈到就是说吃素嘛，他觉得就是说是在这个过程里头呢，这个我们有很多的这个人呢，就是吃荤的，然后呢，他在这里讲说是1磅的牛肉你要生产，跟不是1磅，就1公斤的牛肉跟你要生产这个1公斤的这个 potato， 就是那个马铃薯，它所需要的能源是跟水的消耗呢是不成比例的。那这个生产这个蔬菜呢，它可以减少这个就是所谓能源的消耗，而且呢，就是说是也可以就是说是改善全世界的粮食危机的问题。他有提到这些问题。那我不晓得大家对，好 ，OK， 千亿。
我可以用中文吗？老师帮我翻译。
没问题，你就用中文讲。
对，就是因为台湾目前啊，衡量是否应该进行，譬如说农地开发，盖成美丽的农舍，这样子，都是好像很多人都是以赚多，就是说他如果没有开发没有盖，他就少赚了多少钱，对，为衡量标准。那我不知道瑞士在农地保护的状况是怎么样。
哦 ，OK。
对。
There is some case in Taiwan we try to develop the farmland, and sometimes they build a beautiful farmhouse and try to increase the price of the farmland. And what she asked is what happened in Switzerland. How do you protect the farmland in certain way?
We have a planning law in Switzerland which makes the distinction between land where you can build and land which is agricultural land, and land which is for other purposes. And this planning law is usually implemented on the regional level. Now, it is basically prohibited to build houses on farmland, except if they are for agricultural purposes. You need a permit for that. The question is, what is agricultural purpose? So there have been cases, the most famous case I remember was in the 1970s, in one of the very fertile flat areas in southern Switzerland. I think it was a dentist or a lawyer, I can't remember, built a farmhouse. I said it is a farmhouse. And there was space for chickens, space for pigs, and there was space for the dung, for the manure, on the plan. In reality, the space for the manure was a swimming pool, and the spaces for the pigs, they were rooms for guests, etc., etc. It was not a farmhouse at all. It was only a farmhouse on the paper. And I think it took the authorities several years until this house was demolished. It had to be demolished because it was not for farming use. It was just the trick which had been applied. So basically, if someone builds a house construction which is not farming construction, then it has to be demolished. And this has become even more strict in recent years. We had a revision of the planning law, I think two years ago, which reinforced the protection. Of course, there are problems. You have a big farmhouse, when traditionally farmers had big families. So this farmhouse has many rooms. Now, farmers don't need hands, they need machines. So what do you do with the other rooms? You can make them up as holiday apartments. And this is a limit case, you know. This is all the case. It is allowed because if this is a supplement to farming. But you cannot transform your farmhouse into a hotel and stop farming. You have to continue farming, and then it is allowed that you can have holiday apartments as a supplement to your farm, to your farm income.
It's a kind of homestay.
It is homestay. It's a kind of homestay, yeah. Yes. But
他们可以开发，但是不能建新的扩充他们的农舍。
不能扩充。
不能扩充，就是它可以有他们的盘子，然后那个盘子呢，就说是农舍呢，它可以就是给外面人住，就是他们那个假日的时候有都市的人到那里去住，他们可以允许这样的行为，但是不能扩建农舍，
也不能改建。
对，不能改建，对，就是不能就说是增加面积了。
所以他们的刚刚我听到是说，他们以前也是跟我们现在一样，就是也是有游乐设施，有游泳池什么的，是吗？就是他们以前也是跟我们一样，是吗？
那是另外一回事。如果说是有游泳池，可能就是那个对他如果是在农地上，你要挖游泳池呢，不行。Can you build a swimming pool nearby farmhouse and let the tourists use it?
I think you have to justify it, but I think this should be possible if it is strictly limited to the farm and the guests. But this is a very good example of impermanence. You make a law that the case of these holiday apartments was not in the law. So you think the law is
the law from central government?
Yes,
right?
it's the law, the framework law. Yes. And the case, this specific case, was not in the law. Now, new needs arise. So the law is not final. The law is also something which develops. So they had to introduce these possibilities also for farmers.
他说那个法令有时候也会慢慢在改变，就是有时候
真的需求改变，
会调整，对。那在台湾，它这个是中央的法令，就是你禁止就农地要农用， 然后呢，你禁止农地呢扩建那个农舍，它保护这个优良农地。那这是中央法令。那像台湾就是像宜兰过去一阵子就是允许开发农舍，就是在那个农地里头建农舍。后来就是中央政府开始介入，就是说不准继续来开放这个农舍的新建在宜兰。
好像没有执行得很彻底。
对，但是呢，地方的政府，其实这个地方政府的权责，他是说是不是要严格管制的问题。但是在瑞士呢，它是很严格的，中央政府的法令呢，它一定要遵守。你不遵守，他就把你拆掉。房子你如果是增建，房子就拆掉 ，demolish， 就是把它拆掉。对，这里。
谢谢。
OK， 好，还没有问题。好 ，OK。
请老师，我可以用中文讲吗？
可以，没问题。
刚刚讲 consumer 呢 ，one way culture 的时候讲到说这个消费者丢弃了很多的这个食物哈。那么我知道在欧洲，尤其在瑞士、德国、北欧啊，他们浪费食物啊是犯罪的。就是说，你如果东西叫了很多，结果你吃1/3、2/3没有吃，如果马上被检举的话，警察就会来过问。这个有没有法律的依据？还有教授对于这个中国或东方的观察，因为我们的文化没有这个法律去限制它，所以对浪费了很多的食物，在生产方也好，在消费方面也好，对于这种物资的这种浪费哈，不当一回事。反而认为是说，我如果请客的话，这样子非常的体面，不把这个食物的这种珍惜啊，把它当跟欧洲人一样看待。
But he asked is any regulation to control the waste of food or waste of commodities in Europe, in Sweden or in Germany? Because he said he heard something about if you cannot eat the whole thing, then you order. Then there are some law going to punish you or something.
I have never heard of such a law. Certainly, we have nothing in Switzerland about this.
How about the waste of food?
Food waste? No. We have only appeals. I mean, it's a moral. Basically, it's a moral question that you should not take more. And say if you are in a buffet, for buffet, and it's tempting. There's so many good things, but then if you take, you should eat it.
Yeah, right. You can take
take as much
as you like.
Yes.
You might eat them all. Them all.
Morally, you are obliged.
Right. You are right.
But of course, there's no punishment.
对他讲说，在瑞士跟德国，其实他们你叫多少东西，他们就是好像有一种道德责任，要把它吃完，或者是没有吃完，他就要带着走，不能随便浪费。是的，但是呢，他并没有法令，就是说是一定强制你，就是说你一定要吃完，不吃完我就把你抓去关起来。现在大概还没有这种法令，到底还是民主自由国家，所以大概不会强制。
Well, food waste is a problem, and I mean the figure I said, the UN estimates about a quarter of all food produced is thrown away. This could be, it may be much more in Europe.
More than Europe.
It could be much more in these so-called civilized countries, because we have so much food, too much food.
You mean in EU country, 25%?
Europe, I think, North America, wherever.
25% of food.
I think this is a world estimate.
Yeah.
But,
all
yes,
over the world.
but I think the so-called, I think this is a world estimate. But I think the reality is that in so-called developing countries, there's probably less because they have less food, and in so-called developed countries, as a so-called developed countries, it is really more because we have far too much food.
In Taiwan, I think the habit is changing. In Taiwan, when we go to a place to eat, if we cannot eat them, or we pack it up and take home.
Yes, of course there are solutions, as you say. Take home. This is one solution, which is rare in Switzerland. Restaurants do not offer it. It's a cultural problem. You know, in Italy, I think it's no problem. If you have a big pizza and you can only eat half of it, they will pack it up for you. This is no problem. But in Switzerland, no, we are too rich for this.
In Taiwan, I think there are a lot of restaurants. They have a box.
Boxes.
Box to put the leftover. You know, you cannot give them, or you must carry it out.
This is something you can educate the people.
Yeah, right.
You could educate this. But the situation has become, I think, a bit worse. Because in former times, I don't know what this means, until the 1970s, 80s, when there was food surplus, you would have farmers who would come along from one restaurant to the other and take the excess food and feed it to the pigs.
Oh, to pigs.
To the pigs.
Yeah, right,
this would be perfectly okay. But now we had these various cases, BSE and other things, and regulation of what you can feed to the pigs. They have become much stronger. So this food usually ends up just in the ordinary waste. And this is bad.
Food waste begins in the factory already.
Of course, I mean, food waste starts with the producer.
Yeah.
Basically, you have it all along the chain. The farmer who does not take the complete harvest. When I was a boy, I grew up during the Second World War. We would go, after harvest, we would go to the fields and collect the grains, wheat or whatever it was, collect the grains. And we had maybe a whole bag full of wheat, which we took to a farmer who had a small thrashing machine. Then we got the grains and we could feed them to the chicken. So it was reused. Then you had birds that were coming in and feeding on the remains. Now the modern machines, they harvest much more cleanly. Everything is processed right in the machine. So it's little which remains behind. And then of course it's in the factories. And then it's excess production. It's food. The famous one for me is always the date. They print the date on the packet. Used by, today is the 24th, used by October 30th. A Swiss association has made a test, and they found that if on yogurt you have a date, this yogurt is perfect until 1 month after the date. Only after that, then the quality begins to decrease. So don't look at the date. But don't open the yogurt. If you open it, of course, it will degrade. You can't keep it open for this month. But if it's closed in your fridge, it will keep. Milk used to be about 4 or 5 days above.
Only.
Yeah, well, milk is more delicate. Unopened box of milk would keep about a week more than, well, of course, if you open it, you have to use it. So the date is not really relevant, but many people just look at the date. Oh, that's yesterday. Off. Dry bread. You can bring it to the swans, to the lake. You can give it to the donkeys if there are donkeys, or to the horses. Or you can make food out of dry bread. There's no problem. But people have, in a way, lost the touch to this reality.
So how do you deal with the date? If it is, it's already past the date, yesterday, then can you eat it?
Of course. Of course. I mean, we look at the date if we have a stock.
他在里头也提到，就是说那个食物它会打上什么时候到期。 你过后就不要吃这样。但是这个就是很浪费的一个行为，就是说这个到时候这些食物就是浪费掉的。
我就是这样子，那我就问厂商嘛，说哎，你这个题上，那我还可以吃啊？
对对。
他说可以，那我说那你为什么要打这个日期？他说政府规定要。
对呀，就是为了健康的问题，实际上不见得是那个，本来是可能是再过5天都不会有问题，但是呢怕这个政府也怕出事情，所以把时间提前，就是这样。那这个就是有很多问题，就浪费食物这个是其中一个。刚刚还提到就是他就是用那个机器耕作啊什么，以前都可以把这一些那个生产的过程里头，这个有多余的东西呢，可以喂猪啊，喂什么喂那个鸭子鹅啊，可以喂。现在用机器那个就是整个就是浪费掉了，很多的这个食物就会浪费掉这样。
You know, the market is absurd, and politics is absurd as well. For example, apples must have a certain size. Apples. If they are too big, you cannot sell them, they are too big. If they are too small, you cannot sell them because they are too small. They are not standard.
But they are all apples.
If a potato has a strange shape, you cannot sell it because people think it is crazy. We once got a cauliflower, big cabbage, yeah,
白菜吗 ？cauliflower.
from a farmer who said, I cannot sell it because it is too big.
太大不能卖，太小也不能卖，它一定要标准格式。
The EU had, I think they have come back on this now, but the EU, they had edicted norms for cucumbers. They must be either straight or just have a certain angle, not more. Otherwise, they're not tolerated in the shops. Yes, they have abandoned this idea. But it's absolutely absurd. I mean, all the intelligence which was spent on stupid standardization is so ridiculous. You could use your brain power for much better things than this. So, in part, we have been led into the idea that an apple must be pure, nice, no stain, nothing, must be absolutely pure. But then if it is totally pure, you you wash it before, because it has been treated chemically. If you go to an organic farmer, then his apples will not be pure, but they will be much better. So our social system is crazy.
OK， 好，我们就这一场就到这里，好，我们再过5分钟，在第2场。